Welcome to the Action Lab Leadership Podcast, the show where we have honest, unfiltered conversations with business leaders. I'm Danny, founder of Action Lab Leadership, and today we are joined by Sven Rösch, the head of sales at Valo Motion. Sven, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Danny.
I want to start this conversation where I always do. Leadership is a word that means a lot of things to a lot of different people. How do you define leadership? And what does it mean to you for someone to be a leader in an organization?
Yes. So leadership in business, to me, is first and foremost a service function. It's there to support, virtually anybody that works in the organization because they are the people who bring in the results, and leadership is there to support them, to support all of them. And being a leader in an organization means it's a lot of responsibility.
Is it responsibility that you enjoy and appreciate? For you, what is your favorite part about being a leader? Because there is responsibility. There's a sense of ownership and sometimes burden that comes with being a leader, but there's also so much joy that could come from it. What are your favorite parts about that?
For me, I think it is like I get energized by seeing other people grow into a role or grow outside of what they believed was possible, sort of, and move something forward, and to be able to instigate this, to motivate others, sort of, to take their path is something that I absolutely love, and I also feel that being in a leadership position is a never-ending learning. It's certainly been a path for me to get here, and I know it's going to be a path still to go until whenever I retire from this or something else that I'll do. The learning never ends.
Well, in that case, even when you retire, you'll be a leader in a different way. It may not be as part of an
Yes.
organization where you're getting paid a salary to do a job. It could be part of a volunteer organization. It could be part of your community, your family. Everyone is a leader in some way because I sometimes people think about leadership as a title, and it's not. It is a choice to be a positive influence on the people around you. At least that's one of the ways that I define leadership.
hmm Yeah, I fully agree. It doesn't. Leadership is nothing that starts at 9 and ends at 5, is it? It's something that touches really all parts of your life in one way or another.
Yeah, there's no clock out on being a leader. It's not,
hmm
oh, the day's done. I'm no longer a leader. I can now go, be whatever I want to be instead. Where every, it's that reminder that every room that we walk into, every conversation that we have, every interaction that we have, all of that is a chance for leadership. And everything that we do, people are watching. Not in a
hmm
creepy way, but people notice the way that we show up and how we treat others and the way that we act. Everyone around us, especially our peers and our employees, they all see that. And it either builds more trust with them or it can decrease trust with them.
hmm and that means you're on all the time, doesn't it? It's something that does require learning, at least for me, right? So if you don't in a way get time off from the role. There's expectations, of course, sort of that people around you have, and they may look at you for answers as well as safety and calm, and that's something that I certainly want to provide on a daily basis. So the way you show up, the mood you're in that day, or your demeanor, it matters every time.
There's Brendan Burchard is a big person in personal growth and leadership, and I'm a huge fan of his. And one of the things that he talks about is summon the best of who you are every day. And that's what it's about. Regardless of how you feel or how much sleep you got or what's going on in your personal life, summon the best of who you are. I want to go back to something that you mentioned when you described what it means to be a leader, and it's helping people grow beyond what they thought was possible, growing into new roles, expanding themselves essentially. Are there people who do that for you? Because we as leaders, we recognize the ability and the need to do that for other people around us. But it's also, I
Mhm.
think, helpful to pull back the curtain, and every leader has a leader. Every leader has mentors. Every leader has someone that they look up to and respect, or people who push them. So do you have people that are helping you grow beyond what you think is possible for yourself?
100%. It starts with you, Danny, and the mastermind group. Sort of that definitely helps surrounding me, sort of with people in a similar situation that I learn a lot from. And also, I think sort of as leaders, even within our organization, we don't work in a vacuum. There's a leadership team, right? There's other people who have similar responsibilities, sort of who become sparring partners, if you will, who you can learn from. But for me personally, I have to say it's also family. So it's I think the support of my life outside of work, especially through sparring with my wife or friends in that way, are all things from which I learn and that influence the way I develop myself as a leader. So there's plenty of resources for me personally.
When you say sparring partners, what exactly does that mean in a practical sense? For you to spar with someone at work or with your wife, because that people might assume a negative connotation with, oh, that means you're fighting with that person. But I'm assuming there's more to it than that. What does it mean to you to spar with somebody?
For me, it means sort of a back and forth of ideas, or simply to bounce something off of somebody who has had a similar experience, or maybe a completely different look, sort of at life or things. And this is usually where I learn the most. If somebody offers me a viewpoint or an opinion that I haven't considered before, it increases my repertoire of ways in which I can go about the situation. So that is something that I really, really enjoy. But it has to be like, it can't be anybody, right? It has to be somebody that you trust, because sometimes I think as a leader, it's important that you hear a tough truth as well. And I think you have to be in a mindset where you can really hear what they mean, and something for you to start contemplating and integrating to however you go about a given problem.
Yeah, I'm glad that you expanded on what that means, because it kind of the words that I would use to describe that is almost learning in collaboration with another person.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
glad that we dove into that to understand the meaning of sparring. Now, one of the things you are driven to be very good at what you do, and you are very good at what you do. Prior to the podcast, you had mentioned to me that early on in your career, you had almost gotten fired because of lack of results. How,
Indeed.
what was the story behind that, and what made you shift from that person of struggling with results to where you are now and who you are now? What helped you get over that hill?
Uh, yes, thank you for mentioning that, Danny. That is a story that I remember a lot and very fondly, because it was tough at the time, but the outcome was great. So many, many years ago, when I was a lot younger, I was working as a project manager with an opportunity to move over into a different profession, sales. And as young and as arrogant as I was, I thought, that's great. The job is easier and I get more money. Man, was I wrong. It really did not go well. I went for several months with really poor results. I just had my baby boy, and I was about to get fired for poor performance in a job that I had a really hard time sort of understanding and sort of coming into. And there was a moment there when I was already certain I would have to leave the job. I failed at this. That was almost liberating. I worked for a company that was very process driven, and they wanted you to work in a specific way. But it's a way that, no matter how hard I tried, was really difficult for me to adopt and apply. But at that moment, I mean, it was about to go wrong anyway. So I just applied my own style. And something that I personally really like is being genuinely curious about others and what they do. And for me, that's not hard. I had the opportunity to speak to a lot of businesses with very interesting stories. And all I had to do was ask questions. And I just decided to be fascinated by what they would tell me. And I sort of, that was not difficult for me. Sort of, and as a result, I built a lot of trust with these people. And the second thing that happened was that at the time, that company had a CEO who applied a leadership style that was very trust centered and very accountability centered. And once my own style of doing the work actually created results, he was the first one to recognize that. And even though I was working somewhat out of process of whatever the company defined at the time, like I was recognized for driving a trust-based agenda, for being accountable towards other people. And when these two things came together, when I discovered my own style of working, when I learned about me, that I could, like, that my own influence had a positive outcome, as well as a leader in that company who would openly recognize this, that felt fantastic. And it gave me so much motivation. And it truly generated a turnaround. Within the shortest amount of time, I was very, very successful at what I was doing. I started being a coach there as well. And finally led me on the path to what I'm doing now.
There's so many interesting things that I want to dive into that you had just talked about. One of them is that in that company, you deviated from their standard process, but you got the end result that they wanted. And it reminds me, the last interview that I had for this podcast was with Jeff Willey, and he described to me how early on in his business ownership journey, he was very, very particular about making sure that employees took the exact path he defined to get to the end result. And over time, he's loosened the reins and become less attached to the path. As long as the outcome is the successful outcome, he doesn't care as much about the way that they get there, as long as they do it well. And I think processes are good. And also the end result is the most important thing. So there's kind of both ways to look at that. I think it's really powerful that you had a leader that could recognize, hey, this is not our process, but these results are great. And it's not like you were breaking the process in a way that was, breaking the law or doing something that was like ridiculous. It was just doing your own style of it. And I think that's powerful for leaders to recognize that the end result oftentimes is more important than follow steps A, B, C, and D that exact way in order to get there.
Yes, and I would say that was definitely my learning. So it's not like, like you say, I don't think like I was being a rule breaker there. On the contrary, sort of, I was still working with the same components. I just changed the order up, right? Or I would build a story in a way sort of that I could personally relate to more. And once it became more genuine, I think it like also the other side sort of felt more like, if it's more genuine, right? It's like, okay, this person is actually talking to me. Sort of, you build a lot more trust simply by not going through whatever bullet points sort of you have in front of you, but you actually rely to a person. And I think that does two things. I think in business, it's much more person-to-person communication than we sometimes, in an AI-driven world, we like to remember. In the end, it's still people doing business with people, and it's important sort of to go by their pace and whatever they need. And I think it creates also more meaning in the employee if they have a sense of control, a sense of agency over what they're doing, and they can actually participate in creating their own success. I think this is something very, very meaningful for everybody inside an organization. And having experienced this myself and what it did to me is also something what I want to provide today. I like giving people personal freedom within certain boundaries, of course, and within a certain rule set. But I think that we as people are happier if we can take the reins ourselves, so to speak, and if we're somewhat in charge of our own success.
Well, you talked about making genuine connections with people. Excuse me. And you described, and I wrote this down, that you would ask questions and decide to be fascinated by what they said, and instead of following bullet points. And I love that line, because that is basically what I'm doing right now. In these podcasts, I have an overall flow and a general direction I think we're going to go, but I don't ask question 1, then question 2, then question 3. I ask a question, I'm fascinated by where we go, and I ask follow-up questions, and we just dive through the conversation. And to me, that's more fun than memorizing a list of questions and asking them in order. And I think that the conversation we get to more interesting places because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last piece, this is something that I want to hit on that you said at the very beginning of the story, that it was when you had the realization that you weren't doing a very good job at first in that role. And you said this is something that was tough at the time, but you look back on fondly. I think that's so fascinating because almost in my experience personally, and the people that I talk to and the people that I coach and lead, that is almost always the case for every tough time. That we're in the middle of this tough time and it's hard in the moment. It's tough in the moment. We don't want to be in it. We don't want to experience it. But then on a long enough time horizon in the future, when we have space to learn and grow from that, we realize, oh, that was actually a gift because of X, Y, or Z. I learned something or something better came along or I became a better version of me or whatever it is. Do you find that experience in other difficult things in your life as well, that at the time it was tough, but you look back on almost fondly because you learned from it?
Yes, I would say so. Of course, it's important that the turnaround does happen, right? It's important that you are in some way able to learn something from it and apply it sort of to new situations. So, like whatever challenges sort of we go through on a daily basis, we can't get stuck in that moment because I think that can be crushing in many ways. And sometimes I think it can be hard to see that you have sort of, in a way, walked away from it or that you've grown from it. And that's where this network of others around you that you asked about earlier is so important. People that can remind you that, hey, can't you see the win in this? And I think that's a really important part of the support network, sort of that we need, sort of as leaders ourselves, sort of to reframe certain situations. Like, okay, this is what I learned. This is how I'm better now, or this is how I succeeded from it.
Well, it's, for me, something that I think about is that learning from experience doesn't happen automatically, because you and I both probably know people in our lives or that we've met, whether they're friends or just ancillary people that we know, who have experienced a lot of stuff but haven't learned from any of it. And they just keep doing the same things, the same mistakes again and again and again. And I think it's not just going through a hard time. Excuse me. It's not just going through a hard time, but it's also being able to intentionally reflect and extract wisdom. I don't think wisdom just happens automatically, because experience doesn't just make you wiser. It is learned experience and it is reflected experience, and it's extracting those lessons and saying, what can I learn from this and how can I show up differently next time? What can I change next time? How can I adjust the way that I approach this and learn from it so I don't make the same mistakes again, or I don't fall into the same trap again, or anything like that?
Yeah, I fully agree.
I want to switch gears here of something else, where you used to be an avid rock climber, and I think you still rock climb today as well. But you've told me before about the transition between being a rock climber yourself and then moving into coaching others to climb, and what that experience was like from being the kind of high achieving doer individual yourself and being able to create a spark in another person. What was that like for you? And what was the drive behind wanting to do climbing coaching? And what is that like for you to see someone else achieve something they didn't think was possible?
In many ways, I think, Danny, that story completes the other one about me, like coming into a new profession, sort of, and failing at it at first, because there I was sort of on the receiving end of positive leadership, of the reinforcement of whatever I did in that moment was the right thing, because it created the right results on many levels, and that made me feel great. And I think in climbing for the first time, I experienced what it would meant to be providing that environment for somebody else. So I've been climbing for many years, and it really influenced everything in my life. It's how I met my wife. It's how I ended up in this job. I have many friends because of this, and it did a lot for me, sort of simply as a person. And I just loved it very much as a sport, and I couldn't get enough of it. And it would challenge me in all the best ways. And I would dream about climbing, and I would go climbing. Like there was nothing else without climbing for a big part of my life. So I ended up being quite okay at it, and at least good enough so that I would be able to participate in local competitions as well, which was a lot of fun. But I learned that sort of many people around me, they looked at it as an extreme sport. And I never saw it that way. Like for me, it's something that's very safe. As long as you know what you're doing, like it is with anything in life, it's a very, very safe thing and a very, very meaningful thing to do. So I started newcomers who never climbed before to the gym. And I told them, I know that you can do this. And understanding how a climbing route works and understanding roughly sort of what a person can do, even somebody who doesn't train climbing or even exercise on a regular basis. I knew what to give them or what to tell them to do so that they could reach the top. And the result was always the same. They would reach the top, they come down, and they would have this incredible like sparkle in their eye and looking at me sort of in this excitement saying, I did this. Like, did you see me? Like, I was on top of that climb and almost not believing what they were capable of doing. And and that and that became a lot more meaningful to me than climbing hard myself, because now I was able, like whatever I felt when going climbing, I learned that I can share this to others, right? I can make others feel that great or fantastic about themselves and discover something new. And I just got hooked in a way to that. And I started becoming a climbing coach after. And sort of I did some other things as well. And I learned that in work life, it was the same, right? Sort of I could pass on something to somebody else by being excited for them and by being excited for their success. That this kind of, I guess, set me on the path to a leadership role.
Well, there's an interesting parallel between what you described in climbing and leading others in work, because you climbed yourself and you would climb hard yourself and you'd be able to get certain routes and walls and it would feel good. But then being able to coach others and realizing, oh, letting them be able to climb and experience this and overcome that challenge that they didn't think they could do, that's where the spark comes from. And in work, I what I see often is that people who are first-time leaders, they've spent their career up to that point being the doer. They do the work and they get all of their fulfillment and their satisfaction from the work itself. But then they're put into a position where they're no longer doing work in the same way. They're leading other people to do that work. And that can sometimes be a hard transition because it's like, well, but I used to do the work myself. And if I'm not doing the work, what am I actually doing? And it's realizing that, oh, we can help the other person grow through that. We can help them become as good or better than you were in that role and have the spark in their own eyes and the excitement to overcome. And I think that you having that innate built in is probably what makes you one of the many things that makes you a good, powerful, and effective leader in your organization, because you care more about helping the other person achieve the thing than you do about achievement yourself.
Yes. And at least for me, I think, and climbing is a great parallel for me. They are like my self-worth was not tied to the climbing result, right? It was not tied to like me sort of doing route A, B, or C, sort of whatever I wanted, sort of. I tied a lot of meaning and happiness sort of to the sport itself and being able to share it. Right. So for me, it was always much more meaningful that others would come to the sport um, than me being there alone in a way. And that's the same for me today. Like I think the biggest compliment of being a leader is when somebody surpasses your skill set and gets even better,
Mhm.
right? And sort of finds their own way, sort of excellence. And if sort of we as leaders have a small part in somebody else's journey to that point, that's a job well done.
As someone, I started climbing earlier this year, a few months ago, and so it's always interesting to talk to somebody about climbing because I'm loving it right now. And one of the things that I have seen, one, I'm getting the newbie gains, so to speak, because I'm early on that I can see progression really fast, which is super fun. And being able to try routes that I can't, and I finally get it. I'm like, yes, and it feels so good.
Hmm.
But one of the things to echo what you were saying is that for me, if I go climb alone and I'm just on auto belay, it's fun. But if I'm there with friends, it is so much more fun because it's a social
Hmm.
experience and it's connecting with other people. It's not just about, oh, I want to get to the top of that wall. It's, hey, let's enjoy the process with one another and have a good time. I also, you had mentioned earlier that people sometimes view rock climbing as an extreme sport and you don't. And I understand why, because it is very safe with the harness and the ropes and everything else when you have someone belaying you. But you also ride motorcycles. And I think that's something that a lot of people would also view as an extreme sport because you ride them on a track and you race motorcycles. Um, do you see parallels between racing on the track and your own personal excellence in work or racing on a track and leadership at work? Do you see any parallels between that like you have with rock climbing?
Mm, yes, because first of all, I love the sport. Yes, you're absolutely right. And it's for example something that I even share with my wife. And I think so. There's that social element again, right? It's something that you do with somebody else. Um, but for me also, it's similar to climbing where my self-worth is not necessarily tied to a specific lap time or result, but it's about the path. Like um like I have my own writing coach, and she told me something that I felt was really meaningful, for my learning of the sport that can potentially be dangerous. She said, "Don't write faster, write better." And that's something that I can really take to heart because I think, especially in business, sometimes sort of we can be focused so much on the bigger result or the more money or better this, better that. But in the end, what gets you there is doing the job better. And it's about a learning curve, like small incremental changes, little bits that you pick up, things that you apply with care, not recklessly, but carefully, right? And that makes a race bike go faster around the track without you ending up in the ditch.
So if I were to interpret that quote correctly, it's less about saying, "Hey, I want to shave a second off my lap time," and more about, "Hey, when I am doing my left hand turns, I need to rotate my knee and my hips a little bit better because I'm not getting my tech. I don't know anything about racing, so forgive me, but my technique
No,
isn't
that's
right.
absolutely
Let me
correct.
focus on the technique here, and the result will come. But I'm not focused on the result. I'm focused on the process and doing the riding a little bit better in this spot, and that will give me the result that I want. Am I interpreting that correctly?
That's absolutely correct. So for me, sort of a better lap time is just a consequence of doing something else better. And I feel it's the same in business and in life in general. At least that's what I took from from climbing and from motorcycle racing. In the end, sort of it's doing having a better technique, is doing something better is what moves the needle. And I think, and I told you, Danny, that I think leadership is first and foremost like a service function internally, and it's just one of the things sort of that makes business success, right? I mean, we as leaders, we strive sort of for excellence in leadership and wanting to support our employees as the best we can, but we also need other things in place, like a great product or service that we offer, right? And we want to work on ourselves, our own skill set, our own excellence as well. But if you put all of these things together, that's when I think good things happen.
Yeah, it's interesting too because if I think about business goals, a lot of times someone can start a new year in their organization or their department, whatever it is, and say, all right, well, we want to increase sales by 10% this year or this quarter. And it's focused on that end result. It's focused on shaving off the lap time. But we need to, in any organization, take a step back and say, okay, well, what is the thing we're going to do better in the process to get there. It's not just saying,
Mhm.
let's make a bigger goal and do more of it or work harder. It's how can we be better about the steps that we do moving from here to there. And
Mhm.
speaking of getting better, I think there's a lot of areas that you're so strong as a leader, but all of us have areas we're trying to improve, areas that we want to grow. What are the areas in leadership or the characteristics or qualities that you're trying to get better in right now, that you're trying to improve for yourself and for your team?
There's so many, Danny.
How about just pick a
There's
couple?
a there's so many things sort of I would love to improve on a daily basis, but I think for me personally, the classics are like being probably more diligent and more deliberate with my time spent. I think for me, especially the transition from being a doer to being a leader, that was quite difficult. And I still fall back into these old habits of just wanting to do it myself, but that's not the way. That's not the way any longer. Um, I definitely want to be better at finding enough information within a decent amount of time in order to make the right decisions. Um, to be to be sometimes also a little bit more bold and just taking the step forward, because usually good things come of it, but right, like sometimes hesitation is only good so far. So there's many things sort of that I would love to improve and learn about on a daily basis. And sometimes it's just the little feedback that you get from somebody's facial expression, right? Or very verbal feedback sometimes as well, and everything in between. But I think it's important, sort of as leaders, that we listen and that we absorb all of that as a part of the way, and that's probably another thing that as a leader, at least I would like to develop and keep being better at. It's not personal in that sense, right? So there's a difference between me as a person and as an individual, sort of me doing right or wrong, and me being the leader. Like in the end, sort of negative feedback, honest feedback can be tough to hear, but it's really important to put yourself in a place where you can actually hear it and learn from it, because it's gold. Like when people give you that feedback and you listen, usually that's when you grow and when you make the next step.
And it is sometimes really painful to hear that feedback from others, whether it is someone we report to, or it's a peer, or it's someone who reports to us. Any of those in a work sense, it can be very difficult and painful to hear that feedback. And I think generally speaking, from my experience and those that I've worked with, if it hurts more, there's more truth to it. Even if the
Mhm.
delivery wasn't great, or even if the way they said it sucked, and all of that the source of the nugget there that is at the center and the core of what they're saying
Mhm.
probably is more true the more that it hurts, is my experience so far. And so I think it's helpful that when we hear feedback from others and it does hurt, to take a moment and let ourselves come down from the emotion, but really examine it and understand what is making me upset about this? What is here that I can learn from? How can I adjust my approach in order to be better in this particular area, which is not always the easiest thing to do. But if we want to grow as leaders, we have to be able to do that.
Mhm. Yeah, and it can take a few days sometimes, right? But it's okay that it takes that time, sort of, as long as it's not dismissed for the wrong reasons.
You also mentioned there that you wanted to be more deliberate with your time. And I'm curious, when you say that, for you, is that more of, I want to make sure that I'm scheduling out my day and doing the right things at the right time? Or is that saying when I'm in a meeting or when I'm in conversation with a person, being more present and intentional and focused in that moment? Or is it a combination of both of those things?
It's probably a combination of both. Um, it's I think it's easy for us sort of to say, or for me at least, for me it's easy to say yes to certain meetings without further reflection. So there, I definitely would like to be more deliberate, but at the same time, it's also about whatever time I do spend. Like I want to make sure that this is of value to the people I spend the time with, so that they have my full presence, that they have my full attention, right? And that can give them tools sort of to move forward within that amount of time. And that they, of course, sort of walk away with the feeling that, okay, like this was time well spent.
Is there anything that I haven't asked yet that you wish I did, or anything that we haven't talked about that you're dying to talk about as we kind of move toward the closing section of the podcast today?
Nothing that I can think of spontaneously, Danny. I thank you for the great questions.
Well, and it's hard because I would sit here for the next additional hour or two and keep asking you all these questions and diving further, but I want to be respectful of your time and keep this as focused as we can. So as we wrap up here, the final question that I want to ask you is that we've got viewers and listeners who are learning so many things from this podcast and many other places, other podcasts and books and videos and all these different things. And knowledge is great, but we have to be able to turn knowledge into action for it to be meaningful. And so for viewers or listeners of today's podcast, do you have one action that you would recommend that they take starting today in order to be a better leader in their organization? Of all the things that you've learned in your own journey, what is the biggest force multiplier? What is the one action that you think people should start taking today to become a better leader, whether it's at home or in their community or in a business that they work for or own?
I would always go with allow yourself to be genuinely curious about whatever. I think for me, it's easy to be in a hurry, right? And it's easy sort of to already, like, that your mind already goes to the next meeting or whatever you're planning that day. But on the way there, even if you are under pressure of time, but if somebody says something, anything that you are genuinely curious about, allow yourself to ask more about it and learn from it, because it changes the dynamic and the relationship you have with that person. And I can promise you it enriches your day. So yeah, I'll say allow yourself to be genuinely curious about whatever gets thrown your way that day.
I love that answer because I love curiosity. It's one of my personal core values, is being curious on a regular basis. And for me, it's one of the things that I love about these interviews, because I just get to be here and be curious and ask questions and go down rabbit holes and learn stuff that I didn't know about the other person. And if anybody's listening to this and they're maybe unsure of how to be more present and curious in a conversation, a thought that just occurred to me: why don't you just, in your mind, pretend like it's a podcast that would get published somewhere, and use that as your chance to just, well, let me dig in here. Let me just be curious, instead of, like you said, letting our mind wander to that next meeting or that problem I have going on or that worry in the back of my mind or anything else. Let's be in the moment, because the other person can feel when we're present and when we're there and when we're focused, and they can feel when we're giving them distracted attention. And so I appreciate your time today, Sven. I appreciate you being on the show and sharing so many amazing stories about your life and your career and your journey as a leader. And I think that the listeners are going to get a lot of good nuggets from you. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Danny. Real pleasure being here today. Thank you.
And all of you, thank you for watching or listening wherever you're finding this podcast. If you know of anybody who would enjoy this episode, send it to them. Ask them to subscribe as well, and share the knowledge and share the wisdom that Sven is imparting on us here today. Now go out there, take action in your business, and become the leader that your team needs you to be.